Well, this one is calling on our talents. We'll be singing instead. Eternal Father, bless our land. Guard us with thy mighty hand. Keep us free from evil powers. Be our light through countless hours. To our leaders, great defender, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love. Teach us true respect for all. Stir response to duty's call. Strengthen us the weak to cherish. Give us vision lest we perish. Knowledge send us, Heavenly Father. Grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be ours forever. Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark and the Honorable Fable Williams to join us. They are en route. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to welcome the other specially invited guests that are here this morning. Miss Galina Sotirovo. She is the country manager for the World Bank in Jamaica. We have Miss Dania Ashpole, representing the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture, and Fisheries. We have Mrs. Venice Pottinger Scott. She is the Director General in the Office of the Cabinet, and she also has responsibility for the Public Sector Transformation and Modernization Program. We have Mrs. Velma Ricketts Walker. She's a commissioner of the Jamaica Customs Agency. We have, not seated at the head table, but in the front row, Mr. Trevor Riley, Group CEO, Shipping Association of Jamaica. We have other distinguished ladies and gentlemen and our valued stakeholders. We have members of the media. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning all, and welcome to the joint consultation on the draft customs bill opening session. You are in for an interesting week, and might I say, with Hazel's permission, a week of what promises to be diligent but hard work for this week. So, ladies and gentlemen, this might be the easiest part of it, and it gets a lot more intense, particularly in the afternoon. So those of us who are privileged enough to just be enjoying the opening session, then we might want to count ourselves a bit fortunate. But I'm sure the experts that will get into the meat of the matter later in the afternoon and into this week know what they're doing and will find the sessions instructive, and at the end of the day, we'll end up with a draft customs bill that will do the things that Jamaica Custom has been mandated to do, which is to protect the borders, collect the revenue, and I'm sure paramount in all of our minds here this morning, to facilitate trade. Development and growth requires proper legislative support, and Jamaica Customs, through the Ministry of Finance, or under the auspices of the Ministry of Finance, has understood that, and thus we have started this process to repeal and replace the customs bill. And this morning's session is the start of one of our many stakeholders consultation that we hope to be fruitful. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Cydia Wright to lead us in prayer before we proceed any further.
Good morning. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this morning. You are good, you are gracious, you are merciful, and we are ever grateful. Thank you for your love towards us. Thank you for soundness of mind. Thank you for wholeness in our bodies. Thank you, Father, for this opportunity that we have here today. We commit everything in your hands. All our intents, our desires, Father, we commit to you. We ask that you be in the midst of us. Inspire us today to do good, not for ourselves only, but with consideration for the future, for our children, for this nation. Father, we pray and ask that you will help us to be controlled, to be disciplined, to do all things with respect and love for each other. Be in the midst of us, Father God. Inspire us. Help us to make the changes that are necessary for all of us. Take control of all the proceedings here today. We thank you for your peace. We thank you for your presence. We thank you for your inspiration. Have your way today, we pray, and we give thanks always. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been many transformations taking place at Jamaica Customs. And for these transformations to be successful, you need steady hands, right? And we have a captain who has very firm hands. So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite at this time my commissioner, our commissioner, Mrs. Velma Ricketts-Walker, to give opening remarks.
Good morning, one and all. Good morning. Let me just say that it is really a great pleasure to be here and to have you all here for this joint stakeholder consultation. Because our moderator had already mentioned everyone that is here. I think I don't need to go through it. Can I be allowed that? Thank you. All right. So today we have a wide cross-section of stakeholders from national and international organizations, the public and private sector, academia and civil society, representing for the very important purpose of continued stakeholder consultation on the legislative reform for the repeal and replace of the customs bill. Jamaica Customs Agency started a journey of legislative reform approximately 10 years ago. And this journey started with the identification of portions of the Act that needed reform, and as such, priority amendments were done. Significant to this was the 2014 amendments to facilitate the implementation of the customs automated system as Asekuda World. Modernization is mission critical to the Jamaica Customs Agency. And of utmost importance is our legislative reform. Our role as customs, as a key state agent for trade facilitation and border protection, is one that we take very seriously, given its correlation to economic growth and national development. We know that this great strategic role can be further strengthened with a modern trade facilitative framework. Our role is wide, far-reaching, and impacting, whether negative or positive. Just about everyone conducts business with customs. That is, through international travel and cross-border trade. We're in a world that is constantly evolving, and we must ensure that we are meeting the needs of the changing world. Jamaica's vision itself as the fourth logistics hub. Greater needs our demands for facilitation of speed in the courier services, in transportation. E-commerce is now a reality. The ease of doing business cannot be overlooked as we place ourselves at a competitive disadvantage if we don't get it right. This is to say that with the advancement of ICT, and even with the fourth industrial revolution, coupled with strong facilitative and modern legislative framework, I believe that we are on the right path if we get that right. The document being submitted to you for your review and feedback, concerns and recommendations, was drafted with the intention of meeting the needs of the modern trading environment. We hope to have an enabling legislation that contemplates modern views, i.e. forward-thinking, dynamic, and flexible. Sounds like a huge task, but I believe we can do it. And that has already in train. The major driving policy consideration is to ensure that the bill is consistent with international best practices and recognizes international instruments and principles, such as the revised Kyoto Convention and the safe framework of standards, to ensure that Jamaica can effectively trade in the global environment. Additionally, and very importantly, meeting government of Jamaica's objectives of economic growth and development. Valued stakeholders, your presence here today and for the rest of the week is a clear indication of your commitment in charting the way forward. We anticipate your strong participation in the process as your views, issues, concerns, and recommendations are most important to this process. We are also aware, members, of the short notice given in some instances for the review of the document and crave your understanding in this regard. The agency has always been engaging its stakeholders in gaining consensus in charting the way forward, and this week's joint stakeholder consultation served to further strengthen this effort. Know that your input is valued. The bill is a national bill. It is yours, it is ours, it is for Jamaica. I must thank you for all your input you have put in so far, and special thanks to the World Bank and, of course, the IMF for the technical assistance given as we continue to chart the way forward. The Office of the Cabinet, the Trade Facilitation Task Force, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Ministry of Justice, and our private sector partners. I'm confident that we will have a productive week of consultations and that we will help to advance the preparation of this bill. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would like to officially welcome Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're not too serious and I hope you're all smiles because GIS is live streaming this event. And so if you're doing anything that you don't want to be caught on camera, I would urge you to be mindful of that. Right? And so we say good morning to all the persons who are watching via GIS website and the various social media platforms. Welcome and good morning to you as well. At this time, I invite Mrs. Venice Pottinger Scott, Director General, Office of the Cabinet, to bring remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Initially, I thought I was going to get away with the usual sentence of all protocol observed, but then I noticed the moderator did introduce the minister. So can I still get away with it? Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to see you all, and I see some really important key stakeholders, particularly from the private sector. Happy to see that they're able to make it this morning. Now, the Cabinet Office, through the Public Sector Transformation and Modernization Division, continues to work in very close collaboration with the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries to implement trade reform measures. Based on the comprehensive plan of the Trade Facilitation Program, the Cabinet Office established a technical committee for legislative review, otherwise called the TCLR, to evaluate all trade-related laws in order to contribute to the modernization and streamlining of the institutional and governance framework for trade. Now, this committee has been ably chaired by Dr. Kathy Ann Brown, and she's in the audience. I'm sure we're all going to become very familiar with her before the end of the day. It's a mammoth task that she has taken on. Yes. And she is the Deputy Solicitor General in the Attorney General's chambers. And she has been at this since September 2017, that is the review committee. Now, with a total of 27 members, it represents a wide cross-section of the public and private sectors of Jamaica and is supported by a number of technical working groups and a dedicated secretariat. Since its inception, the committee has been working assiduously to facilitate and compile technical inputs from key stakeholders across the public and private sectors on the discussion documents related to the new customs legislation. It will continue to facilitate the capturing of our valued inputs from our meetings and from the stakeholders and the proceedings of this entire week, not just today. And it will allow for that as we look forward to enacting, as the Commissioner pointed out, the new customs legislation. And it reflects the interest of all our citizens. Now, as the government of Jamaica positions the Jamaican economy to capitalize on the opportunities present in the global economy, so will opportunities arise to create meaningful changes in businesses and the livelihood of Jamaicans. We therefore congratulate the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service and the Jamaica Customs Agency for taking this important step, and we are prepared to continue to support you all the way until we complete this task. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Pottinger Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I invite Ms. Dania Ashpool, International Trade Specialist representing the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, to bring remarks.
So I too would like to get away with all protocol observed. I'm not going to try to play hero here. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to be here representing Miss Andreen Collins. And as you all know, her absence here today is not reflective at all of how she feels about trade facilitation and about trade. You all will agree with me to say that she is a key champion in anything, all things trade. So, I will begin. The Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries is extremely pleased and in fact proud that as a nation we have arrived at this very critical juncture of improving the legislative environment to support trade through improving the Customs Act. Successful completion of the process to repeal and replace the Customs Bill will be, as we say, a big deal. The journey to arrive at this point has not been easy, and our presence here is true testament to dedicated partnerships, consistent support, and unwavering commitment to creating a better Jamaica. I therefore wholeheartedly congratulate the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service and the Jamaica Customs Agency, in particular, on this important milestone. These consultations reflect the ethos of collaboration, engagement, transparency, and inclusion, and demonstrate that we are indeed an economy which is forward-looking and moving in the right direction. This consultative process is representative not only of joined-up government, but also of an active and robust consultative mechanism where those impacted by change are intimately involved in transformation. The Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries is primarily responsible to the Cabinet for the successful implementation of the Trade Facilitation Program. Recognizing the important role of all stakeholders in designing and successfully implementing an inclusive reform agenda, the Trade Facilitation Program, under the auspices of MICAF, is anchored by the Trade Facilitation Task Force, where a dynamic blend of government and private sector bodies have been undertaking and supporting numerous initiatives aimed at improving Jamaica's trading environment. Reform activities such as this monumental legislative change are supported through the Task Force's Technical Committee on Legislative Review. And I would like to pause here to recognize the work being done by Dr. Cathy-Ann Brown on this in anchoring and in spearheading the work of the Technical Committee on Legislative Reform. The Technical Committee enables the best and brightest minds to converge and respond to the challenges faced by Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not discount the importance of an inclusive forum to motivate, agree on, and implement the change we need. MICAF has no doubt that the finalization of the Customs Bill will significantly impact Jamaica's traders in a positive way. This improvement in the legislative environment will undoubtedly improve Jamaica's trade competitiveness, positively impact our ability to attract investment, both local and overseas, and stimulate growth. The impact of such reforms should not be underestimated, as not only are these effective signals to the international trading community as we make it easier to do business, but will translate into improvements for you, me, our communities, and the country as a whole. As we sit here, let us therefore not lose sight of the importance of this process for our national development. It would be remiss of me to not take this opportunity to thank our international partners, and in particular the World Bank Group, for its unwavering commitment to Jamaica. We often see and feel the presence of colleagues from the World Bank who continuously provide support, guidance, and in fact encouragement as we travel this path. We thank you. As government officials, we are only too familiar with the importance of ensuring that the legal framework in which we operate is sound, relevant, and effective. We are also cognizant that the legislative environment must be such that trade is encouraged and supported. Creating this balance must therefore be central to our discussions and deliberations in this week and beyond. I therefore close by echoing the motto of the Jamaica Customs Agency, country above self. Ladies and gentlemen, MICOF commits its continued support for the trade facilitation reform agenda and stands assured by your presence here today that our key partners and stakeholders are on board. I wish you a highly successful week of consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ashpole. And country above self is a good way to end, but it's also a good way to start, right? Ladies and gentlemen, his organization has been so gracious to host these consultations for this week. We are in his house, so to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Trevor Riley, Group CEO, Shipping Association of Jamaica, to bring remarks.
Good morning, Honorable Minister, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure on behalf of our President and members of our Managing Committee to welcome all of you to the Shipping Association of Jamaica today and to this consultation session on the Customs Bill. We are pleased to host this consultation because, as many of you would know, our association has been considerably vocal on the need for a Customs Act that facilitates our march as a country to a logistics-centered economy. As a country so dependent on trade, it has been a source of consternation for us that we have continued to operate under the rules of law passed before most of us in this room were born, perhaps even Lazarus. Mr. Buckner, good morning. We therefore welcome this move towards change. As your host, I am reminded to be nice and not to labor too much on the recent history regarding the various efforts to amend the customs law and our frustration with the process since 2013. I will not dwell either on the fact that we only received this discussion paper toward the end of last week. I will instead hope that this exercise will be fruitful and that participants will have sufficient time to review all the issues that affect their sectors and actively engage in discussing the proposed changes. If the time allotted this week does not afford us to achieve that aim, I hope sufficient time will be given. I thank the Ministry of Finance, the Jamaica Customs Agency, the Office of the Cabinet, and all the other partners for choosing to host the event here. And I pray that our time and efforts will be fruitful. Once again, welcome to Newport West and to the Shipping Association of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. And I'm sure the steady hands and the captain of the customs team that your remarks are not lost in terms of the concerns raised. And I'm sure Ms. Edwards has taken note of those concerns as well. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we'll hear from Ms. Galina Saritova, Country Manager of the World Bank.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And if you allow me, I would like to follow Ms. Ashpore's example to say all protocols observed. So good morning. On behalf of the World Bank, and for me, it is really a pleasure to be here with you this morning when you're starting a process of public consultations on the Customs Act. We have been working with many of you, the stakeholders, to this discussion over the years, and we have been really looking forward to the beginning of those consultations because the true partnership and the really inclusive and consultative process is the only way to ensure that reforms are well defined and address the concerns of the different stakeholders, and once they are well defined, to ensure that they are well implemented. So I'm really happy to be here and to know that you have ahead of you a week of intensive consultations. Trade facilitation is a critical, as was mentioned already, is very critical to increasing competitiveness and encouraging growth in Jamaica. Trade facilitation is one of the indicators in the many different rankings, starting with the ease of doing business of the World Bank and the World Competitiveness Index. And it matters in terms of attracting foreign investment or encouraging, local investment. So in Jamaica, there has been a consistent drive to advance the reforms in trade facilitation, especially following the conclusion of the negotiations on the WTO trade facilitation agreement. For example, and it was mentioned by the Commissioner of Customs, Jamaica recorded reduction in time to export and import due to the introduction of ASICUDA. The port community system is in operation. This year alone, the new national trade policy has been launched, and both the single window for trade and the trade information portal have started implementation. At the agency level, risk management is being adopted to reduce the level of physical inspections and reduce manual processes and the use of paper documentation. And this is all very good, but trade facilitation reforms can only go so far without modern customs practices and procedures driven by legislation that is aligned with international agreements, standards, and best practices. Custom agencies are challenged to facilitate legitimate trade without compromising revenue collection and national security. The Jamaica Customs Agency has set out guidelines for the new legislation that, in addition to the traditional function, speaks to a broader, more progressive view of customs role that also includes promoting socio-economic growth, improving efficiency, encouraging compliance, increasing trade, and facilitating new business models. Legislative reforms take time and can be very difficult. And even more so when you're overhauling legislation that dates back almost 80 years to 1941. And Mr. Riley was mentioning the many years of discussion and the many different efforts. Commissioner of Customs also talked about the different pieces that have been touched, through the years. The decision to move from a three-phase approach to the modernization of the Customs Act, to repealing and replacing, we know has not been taken lightly, given resources available and the timelines agreed. The World Bank has been a partner in this process, first engaging with the government of Jamaica to identify the extent to which the legislation and the draft amendments were aligned with the WTO trade facilitation agreement and with other international agreements and standards, and subsequently to provide expert advice on best practices and approaches to their incorporation into national legislation. So we have been involved, we are involved, and we will continue to be involved with providing advice and support to this very, very important process. The technical assistance to support the reforms of custom legislation is provided through the Trade Facilitation Support Program, which is a multi-donor program launched in 2014 and currently delivers assistance in more than 34 countries, including Jamaica. 8 partners have committed to the program and are funding this program worldwide. Australia, Canada, the European Commission, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United States and the United Kingdom. And we are really very grateful to our partners for their support and assistance, which gives us the opportunity to come and assist in this important reform process in Jamaica. The government of Jamaica and the private sector have commendably maintained their commitment to the process. with varying degrees of intensity at times, as Mr. Riley was alluding to, but have been always focused on the end game. And we look forward to the end game when the legislation is passed and enters into force. It is really my hope that your deliberations, and not only my hope, but I trust that your deliberations over the next few days will result in a final draft that appropriately balances the particular interests of all parties and better places the Jamaica Customs Agency to contribute to the national growth agenda. Thank you very much, and I wish you very successful and productive consultations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Satiruvo. Ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to apologize on behalf of the Honorable Favour Williams. She was en route, but she has some unavoidable circumstances, so she won't be making it today. But we can tell her this much at Jamaica Customs. We appreciate her so much and the working relationship that we have with her. She's a champion for all things customs, all the changes that are going on at customs. She's a major champion behind that. And so we're sorry that she won't be here with us this morning. So ladies and gentlemen, that takes me to the introduction of our keynote speaker this morning. Leading up to this, I said that the keynote speaker needs no introduction, because I think when you hold certain offices in Jamaica, you don't need any introduction, right? But nonetheless, I'll give a brief introduction for those of us who might not be that familiar with some of the experience and accolades that is associated with this gentleman. And he says that it's not necessary, and so I will defer to the minister. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service.
Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Well, I don't know when I agreed to come here on a Monday morning after conference. I don't know what I was thinking. Commissioner of Customs, Venice, head of the World Bank in Jamaica, Galina Saturova, members of the Customs Fraternity, the Trading Fraternity, CEO of the Shipping Association of Jamaica, in whose building we are. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. I'm very pleased that we are at this point consulting with stakeholders on what is a monumental act. Someone earlier recognized the role of Dr. Kathy Brown, and I think we should just give her a round of applause for the role she has played. This is not a simple bill nor a simple exercise. This is dense, detailed stuff, and her role has been instrumental. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you. You know, Jamaica, we've made a lot of progress over the past few years on putting our economy on a stable footing. Macroeconomic stability is becoming entrenched, even though we are not out of the woods yet. However, the macroeconomic environment only provides the foundation on which other reforms must be undertaken to ensure that we can fulfill our true potential. Jamaica is an open economy where trade, imports and exports account for over or approximately 80% of GDP. 80% of GDP. In larger countries, like the United States, trade roughly, I'm giving you rough numbers here, it could be 20% or thereabouts of GDP, just to give you an order of magnitude. So our economy is heavily dependent on trade. So for us to move from where we are now to where our collective vision lies requires us to have an efficient border processing mechanism, because trade is so critically important to us. And the existing legislative framework for the customs procedures dates back to the 1940s. There have been amendments here or there, but the body of the legislation, the meat of it, the foundation of it, is based on provisions that are, or based on practices that we have long moved away from. If we are to take advantages of the opportunities that we have in today's world, then we must repeal and replace the Customs Act. In today's world, Jamaica, stands in a premium geographical position, located on the path from Asia, which is a supply of finished goods and intermediary goods, through the Panama Canal onto the eastern seaboard of the United States, one of the biggest markets in the world. And increasingly, it's becoming more feasible for goods to be taken across by rail from the eastern seaboard to the western and to the Midwest of the United States. So we are well poised to play a key role in global supply chains. However, we can't just talk about it to get there. We can't just dream about it. We can't just say we have a great location and expect it to happen, because we're not the only one on that path. There is somebody in the north, somebody in the west. It sound familiar? Somebody, right? People right around us. And if we don't do it, others will. Now, in this world that we are entering, we want to be in a position where goods can easily come in by one modality and leave by another. They can come in by ship and leave by air. They can come in by air, be processed in Jamaica, but not intended for domestic consumption, and leave by air. We want that goods can come in through one port by ship and leave through another port by ship. Now, the way, you ever hear, the other day there was a function going on, and every now you have these fairs that happen, and people bring goods in, right? Because they want to put up their stall and demonstrate, not demonstrate, exhibit. And then bringing them bags through custom. And the customer said, wait a minute, where are you going with that? We want our share. We said, boy, I'm just coming in for 2 days. This is just an exhibition. And invariably, it causes some friction, right? Now, the customs officer is doing their job based on the rules that exist. But that's just a simple way, because in the commercial space now, right, imagine because Jamaica is a nice location, you bring in goods in and you want to work on them, add some things to them, and then and then take them out. If you're not careful, somebody could tell you the same thing. That before they come in, you have to give me something. Right? Now that is not compatible with the vision of a logistics hub and the vision of taking advantage of our location. So our Customs Act, for more reasons than one, and I just gave you an example, needs to be updated to ensure that Jamaica can take full advantage of the opportunities in today's world. Now, the repeal and replace of the Customs Act builds upon reforms done a few years ago, which outline the provisions to support the implementation of the Executor system. And we must recognize the progress that we ourselves have made, even as we attempt to make more. The numbers I have indicate that since Executor has come in, clearance costs and rates on commercial inflows have reduced significantly, and 85% of commercial shipments are released within 24 hours or less. That's something you can clap about. Risk management when targeting cargo for examination, success ratios have improved, and administrative costs have come down. We've had increased revenue collection and provided accurate and timely trade statistics. And in addition, Asikuda has, we are continuing the work, and speakers earlier spoke about it, on electronic single window, which will allow for a single point where all transactions or all documents that need to be submitted with respect to movements across our borders can be submitted in electronic form. Now, Jamaica today is the most competitive country in the Caribbean region, according to the World Bank's Doing Business report, and it is the 6th most competitive in Latin America. That's no sort of big deal. I mean, that's no small thing. But we're not satisfied with that. Our vision for ourselves goes far further than that. And to do so, we have to make the border processes more streamlined, more efficient, more cost-effective, more transparent, where you're not surprised and commercial persons are not surprised, where small businesses, and that's always a test. The large businesses have huge infrastructure that they have that can deal with the vagaries of a non-transparent, old, outdated system. They have scores of people who work in a customs desk who are able to, and I know that well, right, who are able to interface with customs and sort things out. The small business that employs 5 people or employs 10 people, it would be prohibitive cost-wise to have someone or 2 people who are dedicated to that. And that's the reason why the processes need to be streamlined and need to be efficient in a way that doesn't compromise any revenues that are due to the government of Jamaica. But on the contrary, that allows for the increase in revenues as a number of those firms proliferate. And every person who wants to go into a little business because they see an opportunity can do so. Now, the road to getting there is not simple. As we mentioned, this customs bill is a complicated bill. It is long and it is detailed. And therefore, we are ensuring, while we have a time frame to get it done by, and by towards the end of next year, to have it certainly tabled in Parliament, we have to ensure that what we table benefits from the widest degree of consultation that is possible. And that is why I applaud the Commissioner of Customs and her team for engaging in this process of inviting members of the trading fraternity, members of the community of businesses that deal with customs, that import and that export, and to say to them, look, this is what we are thinking of. This is what the bill entails. Give us your comments so we can incorporate them, or tell us your concerns so that we can address them. We can say to you, we can explain to you why we are proposing that it be done in this way. And that's what democracy is all about. And we in Jamaica have a lot to be thankful for, that that is the way in which major laws are brought into practice. So I want to encourage you to use the process that is being launched today and that's been led by the Commissioner to make what exists already better. Don't try and stop the progress. The world is moving and moving quickly. And if we don't get along, they have no problem in leaving us behind. So today is not about stopping the progress. Today is about making something that is good better. And so, Commissioner, we have a timetable, and it's consultation, then the next draft, and the next draft, and then, you know, and so forth. And everybody knows what the timetable is. So, Commissioner, I'll say to you, well done on getting to the stage. Give her a round of applause. And whether the feedback is small or the feedback is large, the dates don't change. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be having a presentation from the Senior Director of Legal Affairs at Jamaica Customs Agency, Ms. Hazel Edwards. And so what we're going to be asking is that the members of the head table move to the reserved seating in the front row to facilitate this presentation. And Ms. Edwards will be going through the overview of the bill and looking at the policy context. That's what she'll be doing. It's a very short presentation. Following that presentation, ladies and gentlemen, we will have the vote of thanks, and then we will have a coffee break to be followed this morning by an open discussion. And following that open discussion, we will have a lunch break, and then in the afternoon, we will get into the meat of the matter, where the customs bill will be reviewed section by section, leading up to Friday, where we will have the closing session. Ladies and gentlemen, as we await the presentation, Dr. Clark has to leave. He has a cabinet meeting today. And so we thank him once again for taking time after conference and making it here this morning to be a part of this opening session. So, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and welcome Ms. Hazel Edwards. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have been charged with the interesting responsibility of providing you with a policy context for the customs bill as well as an overview of it. And I noticed that the moderator indicated that it will be a very short presentation. Now, when I heard those words, I thought to myself, on the one hand, I'm a lawyer, and I do not know if lawyers are always known for their brevity. On the other hand, this draft legislation has over 300 sections. So the matter of making it short, again, poses another challenge, but I will do what I can. Indeed, as you are all aware, the Jamaica Customs Agency has undertaken this legislative reform program. And this legislative reform program is being undertaken within a wider context of Jamaica's commitment and efforts to achieve sustainable economic growth and development. And for that to happen, Jamaica must develop a highly productive and competitive economy. Now, I recently looked at the 2018 World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, and Jamaica is ranked 70th of 190 countries. Now, whilst that is perhaps the best ranking, we're the highest ranked country in the Caribbean, certainly that ranking of 70th indicates that much more needs to be done. And so continuous reform is important. And the Jamaica Customs Agency is one of the agencies that is at the heart of this economic reform agenda. Let's see if we can get the technology to cooperate. Right. So, why this legislative reform program? As I've indicated, Jamaica is committed to developing a highly productive and competitive economy, and customs modernization and reform is key to that process. Now, for example, the introduction of the Electronic Customs Information Management System, that has been one of the key reforms that the JCA has pursued. The project with respect to the trade single window, albeit this is not a JCA mandate, it's very much a GOJ mandate, but the Jamaica Customs Agency is one of the lead agencies on that project. And of course, customs legislative reform. Now, the Customs Act that we have, that we're all familiar with, is a good piece of legislation, right? It's sound. It has allowed us to do business since 1941 until now. I dare say that the framers, the drafters in 1941 are to be commended, right? Because they did a superb job. But the fact still remains that this legislation dates from 1941 and the attendant regulations are from 1955. Now, admittedly, we have had piecemeal amendments along the way, and so there has been some work done, but it has not been a wholesale review of the legislation to ensure that it has kept pace with all the opportunities that are available for us in the international trading environment. So legislative reform began some time ago, and the Commissioner alluded to the fact that approximately 10 years ago we started this work, and many stakeholders who are in this room will be familiar with that. In fact, one of the products of that reform process was the Customs Amendment Act of 2014, with which many of you would be familiar. But for all intents and purposes, we are where we are now as a result of a decision that was taken in 2017, when Cabinet decided that a move must be made to repeal and replace the Customs Act. Now, what are some of the guiding principles that have informed this legislative reform program? Well, it is important that any new legislation introduces modern customs practices. The legislation should also introduce modern language. And of course, it should ensure that it is consistent with international agreements and instruments that inform modern customs practices today. So that would include, for example, the revised Kyoto Convention. And throughout the discussions this week, there will be much discussion about the revised Kyoto Convention and how we can best implement the recommendations in that instrument. There's a WCO, the World Customs Organization Safe Framework of Standards, which provides guidance to modern customs administrations. And of course, the WTO Agreement on Trade Facilitation, to which Jamaica is a signatory. And once again, there are sound recommendations within that document as to how customs administrations, such as the Jamaica Customs Agency, can become modern. Now, what are some of the matters that are contained in the draft bill that you'll be looking at throughout this week of proceedings? And again, I'm mindful of my mandate to be brief, so we will go as quickly as we can. And it means, of course, that I'm just summarizing the business of getting into the details of the document. We'll be doing that this afternoon and into the week. And of course, in doing so, we'll be benefiting from sound technical advice from our partners, our international partners, as well as from our other GOJ partners who are in the room. And importantly, we will be revising and critiquing the proposals that are on the table, having regard to your feedback and your comments. But one of the first matters that is addressed in this new legislation in part 1 has to do with modern terminology and the structure of the document. So you will see that many terms are introduced that perhaps you were unfamiliar with before. You will see terms that perhaps since the introduction of Asikuda World you have been using, but now we will actually have those terms defined in the legislation. And of course, some of our old definitions will remain because they work. You'll also see too that the structure of the bill may look a little different from the legislation that we have been accustomed to. The document is, as legislation is usually done, it's structured, laid out in parts and subparts. The various procedures are identified. And of course, we're seeking to have the rules and the language as simple as possible. And you will, of course, tell us, undoubtedly, whether or not we have succeeded in that respect. Part 2 deals with customs duty, and this is of course important. The power of the minister to impose customs duty. What are some of the key factors that impact duty assessment so that you, the traders, can be aware of what the commissioner will take into account in determining whether and how much what is your liability in terms of duty. The time at which the rate of duty is determined, that is of course important because that impacts the bottom line, right? Because if duty changes, oftentimes we want to take advantage of the duty change, provided that the rate of duty has changed, has been lowered, right? But if it has not, then of course you want to know because it's going to impact how much money you will have to pay. And then of course the matter of assessments and reassessments. Are there time limits within which the commissioner must complete a reassessment so that you can know, all right, I've imported my goods, and as at a certain point, you can consider the transaction closed. You will know that the commissioner will not be coming back to you for a reassessment. What are those rules? And we seek to lay those out. And of course, the matter of valuation of goods, the principles that we're all accustomed to, those principles will remain, as well as rules with respect to refunds and drawback. And some of the new proposals that you will see there deal with minimum amounts for refunds, as well as the proposal on the table of interest payments. The matter of customs control is dealt with at part 3, and this deals with the appointment of custom controlled areas, which is of course important, the power of the minister to appoint, the power of the commissioner as a new proposal to appoint some of these proposals, the entry and exit requirements of means of transport, vessel, aircrafts, of goods and of persons, what are the core requirements that must be met, and of course reporting requirements for means of transport. And some of the new proposals that you will see on the table deal with passenger name record information, and that is the idea that the data that is in the possession of airlines dealing with your reservation, that information could be accessed by customs, so that long before you have even gotten on that plane, in fact, perhaps even before you've purchased the ticket, customs could have that information so as to engage in risk assessment and determine whether you are a person of interest or not, or the goods that you are carrying is of interest to customs or not. The advanced arrival and departure reports, that is something that many of our stakeholders would have become familiar with in 2014 with the amendments that were done at that time in terms of the advanced manifest, is what we oftentimes refer to it as. And of course, the matter of outturn reports. And I'm certain that throughout the discussions, we will have very lively conversations regarding the question of outturn reports. The clearance and release of goods. A new concept is being proposed here with respect to temporary storage of goods. The language is new, but in some respects, we have been doing it all along. This really has to do with the time period between when goods are imported and when a goods declaration is actually lodged with the customs agency. Now, most of you would be familiar with the concept of the public bonded warehouse, which is really a temporary storage facility, right? And so the new terminology, but of course, there are some new proposals on the table, particularly as it concerns the time period within which goods may remain in temporary stores. And once again, I anticipate that we will have some lively discussions on that topic. Of course, standard clearance and release processes and requirements are also laid out in the legislation governing matters such as, of course, the goods declaration, the content of a goods declaration, who may submit a goods declaration, and of course the matter of release notifications by the commissioner, right? So when the commissioner has approved your release notification, your goods have been duly cleared. When the commissioner has approved your goods declaration and all matters are in order, then of course the commissioner will provide a notification, not just to perhaps the declarant, that is the person who has submitted the goods declaration, but perhaps to other important players in the chain, so that, once again, where there's more information, there can be more certainty, and we can be more expeditious and efficient in how we go about doing our business. Customs procedures. And this may challenge us a little, because it means we have to really get accustomed to some new terminology. But in many respects, the concepts are not new. In some areas, there are some new principles, in others, not so much. Here, we seek to outline the various procedures, and we are seeking to do so in a manner that is consistent with the revised Kyoto Convention. I remember I said before that from time to time throughout these discussions, we're going to be going back to some of these international instruments to see, one, whether or not we're being consistent, and two, how best to implement some of these recommendations. The proposals identify the time when goods may come under a procedure, as well as, importantly, the matter of the transferring of rights and obligations of a procedure, which, based on discussions with you, the stakeholders, we understand that that is something that you require, and it is something that may allow for improved flexibility. Now, what are some of the procedures that are outlined in the legislation? Well, there are rules with respect to the transit procedure, right? Movement of goods under customs control within Jamaica, the transshipment procedure, goods coming in, exiting, warehousing procedure, and here you will see terms that are familiar to you, certainly public bonded and private bonded, but certainly with respect to the public bonded warehouse, it will be, the proposal is to implement it in a way that you have not yet been familiar, right? So you would know that with a private bonded warehouse, goods are allowed to be deposited in that warehouse under bond for a period of 12 months without the payment of duties and taxes. And then you have the option of re-warehousing for a further 12 months. Well, what about widening the concept? Currently, as it operates with a private bonded warehouse, all the goods in that warehouse belong to the warehouse keeper. But what about you and I? We may not have the funds to put up the bond to operate our own private bonded warehouse, but we may nevertheless wish to place goods under the warehousing procedure.
And so the proposal on the table is to allow public bonded warehouses to operate in a true sense, whereby the public, other persons other than the warehouse keeper, can place goods under bond for a period of 12 months without the payment of duties and taxes. It is not just for traders, but also opportunities for the entrepreneurs among us. And of course, you would all be familiar with our Queen's Warehouse. And there's a proposed new terminology to change that to government warehouse. Of course, if you have another term that you like better, that you wish to put on the table, we're certainly not closed and we're prepared to entertain it. Other procedures deal with temporary admission of goods, and this is of course very important. Those persons who may be involved in the entertainment industry, in tourism, in the racing industry, this is a procedure that you utilize very often, and you will know it as temporary imports, right? So we're really talking about the same thing. The terminology will be different, but of course we want to propose some new rules, such as, for example, extending the time period within which goods may be temporarily admitted. Right? The current rules say that if it's a commercial sample, 6 months, all other goods, 3 months. And the proposal on the table is to extend it for all goods to 6 months, with, of course, the power being granted to the commissioner to extend time. And of course, duty-free shops, which is also a procedure that the bill seeks to touch on while not setting out comprehensive rules, because we do recognize that there is a particular piece of legislation that deals with the issue, and we are sensitive to the fact that discussions are underway to revise that legislation. If I'm not brief, I will blame it on the technology. I will say this stole my time. All right. Other customs procedures involve stores, export, and temporary export. And again, for the most part, language that is very familiar to you, but the bill will be setting out some new proposals that we hope will provide increased flexibility. All right. Processing procedures. That is something that is very new that we're proposing to introduce. And here we're talking primarily about inward processing and outward processing. And very simply, what we mean here, certainly with inward processing, the idea that goods may be imported into Jamaica with the intention that those goods will undergo some form of manufacturing or repair, and will subsequently be exported, both the imports as well as any compensating products that may result from that. Outward processing is essentially the opposite, right? You've imported an item, you're allowed to send it out for it to undergo some form of manufacturing or some sort of repair work, and of course, knowing that that good, that item will be re-imported into Jamaica. And of course, it means that we're allowing persons to take advantage of various opportunities. Oftentimes when we talk about this type of activity, processing and manufacturing, we often think about it within the context of a special economic zone. And we all know that special economic zones have their advantages, but they also have their limitations. Oftentimes the quote-unquote small man may feel that he's unable to take advantage of setting up in a special economic zone. But if there's an excellent tailor operating on Duke Street in downtown Kingston, why should he not be able to take advantage of an inward processing procedure? Someone from Trinidad knows that, you know, he's very good. They can send him the items. He does what he needs to do. He sends them back out. He has no difficulties with customs because customs recognizes that he's coming under a processing procedure. And essentially, we are partners, right? This small business operator and customs are partners in a process. And he is not left out of this economic growth that we are contemplating. Expedited clearance and release. There will be provisions to treat with provisional declarations, with which many of you are familiar, treating with supplemental declarations as well as simplified declarations. Ah, something happened. It appears as though my thumbs are too large. Thank you. Ah. All right, so provisions to treat with postal articles, because of course, even when things come through the mail, you still have to engage with customs, and customs has an interest in the various packages and parcels. So we want to ensure that you are aware, all our stakeholders are aware that customs engages so that no one is surprised. And once again, of course, that the rules are fairly clearly laid out. Coast-wise trading, there'll be provisions that treat with that. And of course, we look forward, as I said before, to your input. Wrecked, damaged, destroyed, damaged goods, as well as goods that may be unaccounted for. Those persons who are involved in shipping items, you know that there are times when your shipment arrives and you may have excess in your container, no fault of your own, right? Or items may be short shipped. And the proposal here is to lay out clear rules by which you can bring this to the attention of customs, pay the duties and taxes that are due, and get on with business. Authorizations. This is, of course, an important matter for customs because it provides an opportunity for us to recognize our stakeholders and those players who are compliant. Of course, the matter of access, authorization to access the electronic customs system, that is very important. Certainly, if you're a customs broker, if you're unable to access the customs system, you're unable to do business for all practical purposes. Licensing of customs brokers, because we recognize these persons as customs professionals, they're partners, and as is the case now, the Commission of Customs licenses these persons, and that will continue to be the case. We also, of course, want to recognize in our legislation authorized economic operators. Right? This is an international program, and we want to ensure that there's a firm legislative foundation for this program. But more than that, we also, the proposals here deal with this wider concept of certified status. The idea being that the Commission of Customs should have room to introduce other programs whereby other persons who are compliant can also benefit. Because with the AEO program, it's an excellent program. As I said before, it's an international program. But there are many stringent requirements. And oftentimes there are traders who are not yet able to meet all the requirements for the AEO and therefore would not yet be in a position to benefit from the AEO program. But perhaps there are other programs, right, where they can graduate, as it were, where the commissioner can recognize that these persons have a level of compliance, and compliance should translate into real benefits. Rulings, determinations, and decisions. Part 11 of the draft legislation looks at this. One of the new principles being introduced is the idea of advanced rulings. And this is a very simple concept. It means simply that before you import goods, you can make an application to the Commission of Customs and obtain a binding ruling from the Commissioner regarding how the goods will be classified, as well as the application of any particular rules of origin. And it means, of course, that the trader will have increased predictability. And of course, once you import the goods consistent with the terms of the advance ruling, then you will have the benefit. So we are seeking to reduce that element where persons say, well, here's this new opportunity, here are these new items, but no, my teeth are shattering because what will happen when I get to customs, right? How will it be treated? This presents a unique opportunity for persons to have increased predictability in their dealings with customs. There's also this new concept that will be put before you of voluntary disclosure relief. And here the concept is, again, very simple and straightforward. A person may have made an error in a declaration to customs. It was not intentional. It was not intended to evade customs duties, but it's life and mistakes happen. The proposals here is that persons will have an avenue by which they could bring this this error to the attention of the Commissioner, pay any outstanding duties and taxes that may be due to the Commissioner, and get on with business. All right? In exchange for making the disclosure, the Commissioner will not impose any penalties. And of course, the rules require, the proposals require that the person should not at that time be the subject of a customs audit, right? Because of course you can't run and disclose when we are about to catch you, all right? So it's intended for those persons who are making genuine mistakes, and this is an opportunity for them to bring the matter to the attention of the Commissioner through an established mechanism. And for all intents and purposes, that is the majority of traders, right? When mistakes happen, but you're not setting out to evade customs duties. And of course, administrative appeals, because once again, it's life, and conflicts happen. And disagreements happen. And sometimes the Commissioner of Customs may make a decision and you don't agree, right? Or you are negatively affected by that decision. You should have a mechanism by which you can obtain a resolution of that dispute. Now, in the current law, there is an administrative appeal mechanism in respect of duty assessments. So whether you're to pay duties or how much, there's an administrative appeal mechanism, by which, of course, you appeal to the Commission and ultimately you may go to the Revenue Appeals Division. But the truth is that the Customs Agency makes many other decisions that impact the day-to-day life of our traders. And you should have an administrative appeal mechanism. Of course, you will continue to have the option of accessing the courts. So that door will not be closed. But the proposal is to establish a Customs Appeal Tribunal whereby persons who are aggrieved by the decisions of the Commissioner of Customs can file an appeal. I am almost there. I think I'd still qualify as being short, all right? Enforcement. This is, of course, sometimes a vexed issue, right? Oftentimes we talk a lot about trade facilitation. We talk a lot about the allowances that the Customs Agency must make. But then we're not as comfortable talking about enforcement. But we need to recognize that it is a necessary corollary to trade facilitation. So there'll be new proposals to treat with security. And the guiding principle there is that security must be risk-based. And the proposal is that the Commissioner should have the option to accept other forms of security, right? And that means, of course, that the high-risk trader, indeed, he should probably put up a higher bank guarantee, and the person who has a record of compliance should perhaps be given some allowances in that, right? I'm glad I won't be the Commissioner who will have to take those decisions, but certainly the principle of determining security on the basis of risk is very important going forward. It is very much the international standard. And based on the discussions that we have had with you, our stakeholders, we know that that is something that you require. And we hope that when you look at the proposals, you will tell us whether or not they are sufficiently responsive to the concerns that you have raised over the past few years. Of course, debt recovery is important because there are some persons who owe. All right? And for those persons who are willing to pay, the proposal is that there should be power for those persons to pay by means of installments. But then, of course, there are times when more coercive measures are required because, once again, it is life, right? So the proposal there is that the Commissioner will have power to garnish, to impose liens, and to set off. And just to let you know that these are not new proposals, right? The Commissioner General of Tax Administration currently enjoys these powers, and the Commissioner of Customs, as a Revenue Commissioner, we would invite you to agree, should also have similar powers. Again, with enforcement, there's a matter of investigating, searching, and seizing items, the power to arrest, as well as proposals re the ability of customs, as we now do, to carry and use firearms and ammunition. Offenses, there's a revised approach on the table. We know that this is an issue that is of great concern. We are sensitive to the fact that perhaps there's still a lot more work to be done in relation to this matter. We As with all the proposals, we'll be looking forward to your comments and to your suggestions as to how we can refine it and make design an offense module that is fair, but also one that takes into account our particular jurisdiction. There are general matters dealing with publication requirements, appointment of agents, regulations that can be made by the minister and rules by the commissioner, right? Because we recognize that we're crafting legislation within the context, yes, of international best practice, but it is also important that we give ourselves room to be flexible and dynamic. And once, of course, you're setting rules, you're setting regulations, then it allows us to be responsive to what is actually happening on the ground. And so, I dare say, I ended just a minute short of short. But thank you, and I just wish to reiterate that we look forward to your comments throughout the discussions in relation to the proposals that are on the table.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. It fell somewhere between short and and medium. But it was very, very, very informative, even for someone who works within the agency, how you were able to summarize the sections. It was very, very informative. And so for those of us who won't stick around for the rest of the week, at least we have a greater appreciation of exactly why we're doing the repeal and replace of the Customs Act, right? It's all about trade, it's all about border protection, and the revenue part will flow. The minister wants to hear that, but that will flow. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Sharifa Powell. She's a program manager, Trade Facilitation Program, head of the Trade Facilitation Task Force, to give the vote of thanks. Secretariat, Task Force Secretariat, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I certainly will not break from rank, and therefore I say all protocols observed. Indeed, the pleasure is mine on behalf of the Trade Facilitation Task Force and its Secretariat to move the vote of thanks for this morning's procedure. Minister Clark, though he has left us, if there was any possible doubt of Minister's commitment, it is certainly muted now. Silenced Monday morning after conference, and he was here. His words have concretized the importance of this process, not only as we strive to capitalize on the opportunity provided by our geographical location, but he has painted a practical picture of how we need to facilitate seamless movement of goods across our borders. The words spoken by Ms. Dania Ashpole on behalf of P.S. Collins, coupled with those by DG Pottinger Scott of the Office of the Cabinet, have not only reminded us of the progress already made and which we need to celebrate, but indeed reflect the level of collaboration needed for such critical changes as this activity represents. To you ladies, I extend my appreciation. Commissioner, thank you. Not only for the words this morning, but also for having instrumentally captained the ship to what is now a few meters away from its final destination, as Jamaica meets the needs of a modern trading environment. Through this process, and as guided by your hardworking team and dedicated crew at the JCA, this bill and eventually a new Customs Act will soon arrive at its port of call. Our World Bank representative, Ms. Salvatore, she indeed reminded us of so many of our accomplishments to date: ASECUDA, risk management practices, the electronic single window, the trade portal, and others. And very soon, a reformed and modernized Customs Act will be added. We say thanks to her and the World Bank Group, who never failed to provide the highest level of support to Jamaica, and we most certainly look forward to a continued positive relationship as we, supported by the bank and others, successfully transform our economy pillar by pillar. To Mr. Riley and his team here at the Shipping Association, not only have you demonstrated, sir, the extent of your partnership in this process through active participation, in your words, but you have literally opened your doors to us. And to you, sir, and your entire team, we express our appreciation. I'm confident that the doors will remain open and that you will continue to be nice, as you say. The spirit of this consultative process was firmly and fittingly established by Ms. Wright with a very somber prayer. And we all said amen, and I thank her for that. To our moderator, sir, the mic allowed us to hear that you have a singing voice, and you also skillfully have guided us through this morning's sessions. Thank you. The organizing committee, so many very important elements are needed to ensure the success of an event such as this. The logistics, the refreshment to come, being adequately prepared to engage at this stage in the process. And so our appreciation is extended to you as individuals as you work collectively to ensure that today is a success. To you, distinguished guests, about 5 persons would have been here having a conversation if you had not taken time from your very precious and busy schedule to be here. Competing priorities is a way of life, and so your presence indicates that this week of consultations is at the highest level of priority for you. Indeed, this is an investment in creating the Jamaica we so richly deserve, and we thank you for your presence. To our partners in the media fraternity, your presence here is extremely important as well, as your role in ensuring that the rest of Jamaica, the region, and in fact, the global community is made aware of our progress in repealing and replacing the Customs Act cannot be overstated. You aid in bridging the gap between us and the wider public, to whom we are ultimately accountable. And as such, I say thank you. To you, Ms. Edwards, the balance between detail and brevity was successfully struck with your overview of the bill. Like a tasteful appetizer, we are now primed for the full course. So thank you. I would have failed in moving the vote of thanks if I confined my words only to the events of this morning's session, however. While I will not preempt the events of the week ahead, and cognizant that there's much remaining to be done before a promulgation of a new Customs Act, I take the opportunity to express words of appreciation to the hard-working legal minds of the GCA, again, Ms. Hazel Edwards and her team, Dr. Kathy Ann Brown, particularly in her capacity as chair of the TCLR, as coordinated by the Office of the Cabinet, members of the TCLR, colleagues at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, most certainly the World Bank, in particular Ms. Alicia Stevens and Mr. Brian O'Shea, and all stakeholders who have been instrumental in guiding the trajectory of the development of this bill. In the words of our Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, at the recently held NCC National Competitiveness Council meeting, the world is not stopping and waiting on Jamaica. Further, that the task is ours to create an environment where the private sector engine can work at its optimum. My vote of thanks therefore serves in both a retrospective for the work to date and our morning session, and in a prospective manner, as I do believe we all stand confident that we shall deliver. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take the coffee break, and then we'll resume with the open panel discussion. And we invite you to come back for that. You know, that's a part that you get to talk before they get into the detailed deliberations, which will be after lunch, which will start about 2 o'clock. So right now we'll have the coffee break, and then we'll go into the open panel discussion for about 2 hours. That will take us up to about 1 o'clock. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day. All right, so coffee break is for 15 minutes. So with the discussions will start at 11:15. So that's 15 minutes for coffee break, and we'll start the open discussions at 11:15. Thank you.